It was a picture I didn't want to see. My son, sitting alone in the bleachers, surrounded by empty seats. My ex-wife had sent it to me without a single caption. My chest tightened. My thumb hovered over the image, then I deleted it. Not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't bear to look at it a second longer. I've closed deals worth millions, stood in boardrooms with the most powerful people in my industry. But I can't remember the last time I sat in the stands for my son's game. I traded recitals for revenue, birthdays for business trips, and somewhere in that exchange, I lost the one person whose opinion actually mattered. That photo didn't just show my son alone. It showed me the truth. I had built a life of success, but no one to share it with. My son stopped looking for me in the crowd long before that picture was taken. But I can't stop wondering, is it too late? Or is there still a way to step back into his life before the seats around him, and in his heart, stay empty forever? I'm 52 years old, and for most of my life, I thought I understood what success meant. Born in a small town in Ohio, raised by a father who worked 2 shifts at the factory, and a mother who managed to keep 3 kids fed with coupons and determination, I swore I would give my family everything we never had. When I married Claire at 27, it felt like I was stepping into the life I'd dreamed about. We didn't have much at first, just a tiny apartment with a leaky faucet, secondhand furniture, and a vision of a future where we'd be comfortable, happy, and secure. I promised her we'd get there, and for a while it worked. Our early years were filled with late-night takeout, weekend trips to the lake, and quiet mornings over coffee. Claire believed in me. She believed in the long hours, the business school nights, the networking events that kept me away from home. She told me, "I know why you're doing this, Mark. It's for us." But for us gradually became, for me, in the office. When my company took off, my consulting firm landing its first big clients, I felt like we were on the verge of something life-changing. I brought home my first real bonus, enough to finally pay off our debts. We bought a house, a small but warm place in the suburbs, right before our son Ethan was born. Ethan changed everything. I still remember holding him in the hospital, his tiny fingers curling around mine, thinking I'd never miss a single moment of his life. And I meant it. But life has a way of making promises harder to keep. The business grew, and so did the demands. I told myself the long hours were temporary, that once we hit stability, I'd slow down. Every deal I closed felt like another brick in the foundation of the future I wanted for my family. But the foundation came with cracks. The first argument with Claire about my absence was quiet, almost gentle. She said, "You missed Ethan's first steps today." I told her I'd make it up. She smiled, but I could see something in her eyes, a quiet disappointment that didn't fade. Years passed, and my absences became part of our routine. I missed school plays, birthday parties, games. Every time, I promised I'd be there next time. I believed my presence at work justified my absence at home. But the truth is, our marriage didn't just fall apart because of my work. 3 years ago, everything changed in a way I didn't expect. Claire had received a photo, grainy, taken from a distance, of me at a restaurant, sitting across from a younger woman. It was a business dinner, nothing more. But the timing couldn't have been worse. I was already missing too many dinners at home, already absent for too many moments. To her, that image confirmed the story she had been telling herself, that she was no longer my priority. I tried to explain, but by then, my words were just background noise to years of broken promises. We separated within months, the divorce finalized soon after. Ethan was 11 at the time. I told myself I'd stay involved in his life, that nothing would change my role as his father. But roles change when you're not there to play them. Now I live alone in a sleek apartment downtown, the kind of place I thought I wanted in my 20s. It's quiet. Too quiet. There are no stray shoes by the door, no laughter from the living room, no Claire making coffee in the kitchen. Just me, my success, and a silence I earned. Sometimes I think back to the photo Claire received. Not the one of Ethan alone in the bleachers, that came later, but the one that ended us. I don't know who sent it. I don't know if they intended to destroy my marriage, or if it was just a careless moment that was misinterpreted. What I do know is that it doesn't matter anymore. The damage was done. I built a life chasing numbers, deals, and recognition. And in the process, I lost the one audience that mattered, my family. The first time I truly noticed the gap between Ethan and me wasn't during an argument. It was in the silence. It started small. A school play where I couldn't make it because of a client meeting. A Saturday soccer game I missed because I was traveling to close a deal. Claire used to send me photos afterward. Ethan in costume, Ethan holding a participation trophy. I'd respond with a thumbs up or a "looks great, buddy," but my messages always felt like weak substitutes for my presence. At first, Ethan would ask, "Will you be at my game this weekend?" And I'd say, "I'll try, champ." But "I'll try" slowly became a phrase he didn't bother waiting for. The first big soccer tournament came when Ethan was 10. His team had qualified for the regional finals, and the game fell on the same weekend as an important pitch to a corporate board. Claire told me about it weeks in advance. I marked it on my calendar but still ended up on a plane to Chicago that Friday night. When I landed back home Sunday evening, I saw the missed call from Claire. The voicemail was short. They won. Ethan scored the winning goal. He looked for you in the stands. That night, I sat in my quiet apartment with a drink in hand, staring at my phone. I could almost hear the echo of his voice when he was younger. "Watch me, Dad." But I wasn't there to watch. And then came the twist. The one game I actually attended. It was the start of the next season. Claire told me Ethan didn't expect me to show up, but I cleared my schedule anyway. I wanted to surprise him, to prove that I could still be there. The bleachers were filled with parents and siblings, all chatting and cheering. I spotted Ethan on the field, focused and determined. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in the right place. But halfway through the first half, it happened. Ethan went for a header, collided with another player, and went down hard. The whistle blew, coaches ran onto the field. My heart dropped. I rushed down from the stands as they helped him up. Ethan wasn't seriously hurt, just a mild sprain and a scare. But when he saw me, there was something in his expression I can't forget. Surprise, yes, but also discomfort. Later, as we sat on the bench together, he said quietly, "You didn't have to come, Dad. You're busy." It stung. He wasn't being rude. He was protecting himself. In his young mind, my presence might have felt like an accident, one that coincided with him getting hurt. I couldn't shake the irrational thought that maybe he'd connect my being there with something bad happening. Claire tried to smooth it over. "He's just shaken," she said. But I noticed how she didn't look surprised that he said it. After that game, Ethan stopped asking if I'd come. I told myself it was because he didn't want to pressure me. But deep down, I knew it was because he didn't expect me anymore. The distance wasn't just in physical absence. It was in the way he talked less, shared less. His texts became shorter. Sometimes he wouldn't answer at all. The boy who used to run to the door when I came home now stayed in his room. And yet, every time I looked at my calendar, I found another reason to miss a game. Another meeting, another trip, another deadline. The irony wasn't lost on me. The one time I showed up, he got hurt. And in some twisted corner of my mind, I began to wonder if maybe it was better for him when I wasn't there. That's the kind of thinking that creeps in when you've failed someone enough times. You start to believe your absence is a gift, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. The year I turned 50, my company hit numbers I never thought possible. Contracts doubled, my client list read like a Fortune 500 directory, and for the first time, I was invited to speak at a major industry conference. I had the corner office with the skyline view. My name was printed on glossy event programs. My picture appeared in business magazines under headlines about leadership and vision. It should have felt like the peak. And maybe it did, for a moment. But there's a strange silence that comes with success when you have no one to share it with. At the office, there were champagne toasts, handshakes, and polite congratulations. At home, well, there was no home in the way there used to be. Just the apartment, quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Ethan had stopped sending me updates months ago. Claire rarely texted unless it was about logistics. Drop-off times, school fees, medical updates. My victories had no audience in the places that mattered. Then came the day I learned I had been replaced. Not legally, not biologically, but in the space that mattered most. I stopped by one of Ethan's soccer games unannounced. I didn't tell Claire. I just wanted to see him play. I stayed at the far end of the bleachers, careful not to be noticed. Ethan was different on the field than I remembered. Faster, more confident. He scored a goal early in the game, and his eyes darted instinctively to the sidelines. For a fleeting second, I thought he might be looking for me. But his gaze didn't land on my end of the stands. It locked on someone else. A tall man in a team jacket clapping and shouting encouragement. The coach. I watched closely. Every time Ethan made a play, every time something went right or wrong, his first glance was toward that man. The coach responded with a nod, a thumbs up, a quick word from the sideline. It hit me harder than I expected. That connection, the one I used to have, was his now. After the game, I lingered, keeping my distance as the team huddled. I overheard one of the other parents say, "Coach Daniels has been incredible for the boys. Ethan especially looks up to him. It's like he's got a father figure on and off the field." The words stayed with me longer than they should have. On the drive home, I couldn't stop picturing that game. Ethan's confidence, his smile, things I hadn't seen directed at me in years. I should have been happy someone was there for him. And part of me was. But another part felt an ache I couldn't shake. Success had given me everything I thought I wanted. But sitting in my car that night, watching my son walk off the field with the man he looked up to more than me, I realized success had also taken everything that mattered. I had spent years building a name for myself in my industry, only to lose my name in my own home. The trap wasn't just that I'd chosen work over family. It was that I'd built my identity entirely around work, until there was nothing left of me outside of it. And Ethan had filled the space I left behind, with someone who showed up. The photo came on a Thursday evening. Claire didn't add a caption, just the image. Ethan, sitting alone on the bleachers, his knees pulled close, looking down at the field where the rest of the team laughed with their parents. I stared at it longer than I should have. His face wasn't angry or even sad. It was worse. It was blank. The kind of expression a kid wears when they've stopped expecting anything. My thumb hovered over the screen. A second later, I deleted the photo. Not because it didn't matter, but because I couldn't stand to look at it again. Deleting it was my way of pretending it didn't exist, like all the other moments I'd conveniently ignored. But the truth? That picture burned itself into my mind before it disappeared from my phone. I couldn't sleep that night. I tossed in bed, the image replaying in my head every time I closed my eyes. In the stillness of the dark apartment, I started thinking about all the other times I hadn't been there. Ethan's first championship game, his birthday dinners, the day he broke his arm and I was stuck in a meeting. The next day at work, I tried to bury myself in numbers, emails, and calls. But even as I sat in my glass-walled office, my phone buzzed again. This time it was from Adam, one of my senior associates. "Hey Mark," his message read. "Saw this on social media. Thought you'd want to know." Attached was a short video clip. I hesitated before pressing play. The video was shaky, taken from the stands. It showed Ethan's game from the same day as the photo. I expected to see him playing, maybe scoring a goal. Instead, the camera zoomed in between plays, catching moments when Ethan's eyes kept scanning the crowd. The first time, he looked hopeful, as if searching for a familiar face. The second time, there was a hint of confusion. By the third, his shoulders dropped slightly, like he'd stopped looking altogether. It wasn't just that he didn't see me there. It was that he had been looking for me in the first place. That realization landed like a blow. I had convinced myself that Ethan had stopped caring years ago, that my absence didn't matter anymore. It was easier to believe that than to admit he still hoped I'd show up. I watched the video 3 times before closing it. My chest felt tight, the air in my office suddenly heavier. Adam popped his head into my office later. "Tough to watch, huh?" he said gently. "Reminds me of when my dad stopped coming to my games. I used to tell people I didn't care, but I did. Every time." I didn't answer. I couldn't. That night, I didn't delete the video. I kept it on my phone, as if some part of me wanted to punish myself by watching it again. In the quiet moments, before meetings, in traffic, sitting alone with dinner, I'd replay it. Each time the weight in my chest grew heavier. I couldn't get past the look in Ethan's eyes as they swept over the crowd, hoping for someone who wasn't there. I thought about sending him a message, something simple like, "Sorry I missed the game. I'll be there next time." But I stopped myself. He'd heard those words too many times. They didn't mean anything coming from me anymore. For the first time in years, I started questioning what all of this was for. The deals, the long hours, the recognition. It all felt hollow compared to that empty space on the bleachers. And the truth I couldn't avoid was this: I had put myself in that empty seat. A week after I saw the video, Claire sent me another message. This time, it wasn't a picture. It was just words. "Ethan doesn't expect you anymore." I stared at the text, my fingers frozen over the keyboard. It was blunt, with no room for interpretation. Not "he's upset," not "he's disappointed," but "he doesn't expect you." I typed and deleted 3 different responses before giving up. What could I possibly say? That I was sorry? That I'd do better? Claire had heard all of it before, and so had Ethan. For a moment, I convinced myself that maybe it was better this way. If he didn't expect me, then at least I couldn't disappoint him anymore. But that thought didn't feel like relief. It felt like failure wrapped in cowardice. Over the next few days, I tried calling Ethan. No answer. I sent a few texts. "Hey champ, how's school going?" And "Want to grab dinner this weekend?" Nothing came back. Finally, Claire picked up one evening when I called. "He's busy," she said flatly. "Busy with what?" I asked. "With his life, Mark. A life that doesn't revolve around waiting for you." Her words were like ice, but I couldn't argue. Later that week, I drove by Claire's house. I told myself it was just to drop off a package. New soccer cleats I'd ordered for Ethan, but I didn't ring the bell. I left the box by the door, hesitated for a moment, then walked back to my car. That's when I saw it. Through the front window, on a shelf in the corner of the living room, sat a row of items I hadn't seen in years. A Little League baseball glove, a Lego model we built together when he was 7, and a small framed photo of the two of us at the beach. They weren't hidden away. They were displayed. I sat in my car for a long time, staring through that window. It was a quiet, almost invisible reminder that Ethan hadn't completely erased me from his life. Maybe he didn't expect me anymore, but that didn't mean he didn't care. A few days later, I ran into one of the other soccer parents at the grocery store. We made small talk, and she mentioned the upcoming tournament. "You going to be there this time?" she asked, smiling in that way people do when they already know the answer. "I'm trying," I said. Her smile softened. "You know, he talks about you more than you think. Not to everyone, but I've overheard him tell some of the kids about the trips you took together. He doesn't brag about the fancy stuff, though. Just the little things. The camping trip. The time you stayed up all night watching movies." I drove home with those words echoing in my head. That night, I pulled out my phone and looked through old photos. There was Ethan, grinning with marshmallow on his chin by the campfire. Ethan holding a fishing pole, the line hopelessly tangled. Ethan sitting on my shoulders at the state fair. I realized then that the problem wasn't that he had stopped caring. The problem was that he didn't trust me to show up anymore. And that kind of trust wasn't going to come back with one dinner or one game. It would take time, something I had been too selfish to give. But seeing those old mementos in Claire's house told me one thing. He hadn't let go completely. Not yet. It was a Tuesday afternoon when my phone rang. The screen lit up with Claire's name. Her voice was clipped, urgent. "Ethan got into some trouble at school." I straightened in my chair. "What happened? Is he okay?" "He's fine physically," she said. "But there was an incident. Some argument during lunch, a fight maybe. The school's calling in parents. I thought you should know." I was already reaching for my keys. "I'm on my way." She hesitated. "Don't rush." "What do you mean, don't rush?" "They've already handled it, and he didn't call you, Mark." I froze. "What?" "He called Coach Daniels." The words landed heavier than I expected. It shouldn't have surprised me. Daniels had been in the stands, at practices, on the sidelines, but to hear that my son's first instinct in a moment of trouble was to reach for someone else. I left work anyway, driving without really remembering the route. When I pulled into the school parking lot, Daniels was already there, leaning against his car, talking with Ethan. Ethan's posture was relaxed, his shoulders not hunched the way they usually were around me. He was nodding at something Daniels said, even managing a small smile. I waited until Daniels glanced my way. He gave me a polite nod, the kind you'd offer to an acquaintance. Not a rival, but not quite a friend. Ethan noticed me then, his expression shifting. Not anger, not joy, just a sort of guarded neutrality. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice flat. "Hey, champ, you okay?" "Yeah. It's fine." Daniels stepped in. It was just a misunderstanding. Another kid made a comment. Ethan reacted. Tempers flared. "Nothing serious." I nodded, but my attention stayed on Ethan. "Why didn't you call me?" I asked before I could stop myself. Ethan shrugged. Coach was closer. It was an answer so simple it left no room for argument, but it spoke volumes. On the drive home, I couldn't shake the image of them talking together. Daniels wasn't just his coach. He was the person Ethan turned to when he needed guidance, someone who had earned his trust by simply being there. And the truth burned. I had given that space away. I hadn't been replaced by force. I'd left it open long enough for someone else to step in. That night, alone in my apartment, I replayed the day over and over. Every choice I'd made, every missed moment, every time I told myself, next time. They all added up to this. My son instinctively turning to another man when he needed help. It felt like the point of no return. But there was something else beneath the sting, an unexpected clarity. Daniels hadn't pushed me out. Ethan hadn't stopped caring. The problem wasn't that there was no room for me. The problem was that I'd never fought to keep it. And if I didn't start now, I might never get the chance again. It was the semi-final game of the season, one of the biggest matches Ethan's team had played all year. I wasn't supposed to be there. A client dinner had been booked for weeks, but at the last minute, I canceled. I told myself it was because I wanted to surprise him, but maybe it was also because I was tired of missing everything. The stands were packed, the air electric with noise. I slipped in quietly, finding a spot near the back. I could see him on the field, focused, confident, moving with a grace that surprised me every time I watched him play. Midway through the second half, the ball came toward Ethan. He made a fast run down the sideline, cutting past one defender. Just as he went for the pass, another player collided with him. His legs tangled awkwardly, and he went down hard. I didn't wait for the whistle. I was already halfway down the bleachers, my chest tightening with every step. By the time I reached the edge of the field, Ethan was still on the ground, clutching his leg. The coach and the assistant were kneeling beside him, speaking in low, urgent voices. An ambulance had been called. I tried to move closer, but the crowd of players and trainers formed a wall. Minutes later, they lifted Ethan carefully onto a stretcher. His face was pale, his jaw tight with pain. And then I saw it, the moment that cut deeper than anything else. As they carried him toward the ambulance, his eyes scanned the sideline and stopped on Coach Daniels. Daniels leaned close, saying something I couldn't hear, but Ethan nodded. When I reached the hospital 20 minutes later, Daniels was already there. He was standing just outside the ER doors, talking with the nurse. Ethan was inside, getting x-rays. I hesitated before walking up. Daniels glanced at me. They think it's a sprain, maybe some ligament strain. Nothing broken. He's a tough kid. I nodded, my throat tight. Thanks for being here. Daniels shrugged, almost uncomfortable. He called me on the way in, figured I'd better show up. It shouldn't have surprised me. After the school incident, I knew where Ethan's trust went first. But standing there in that hospital hallway, the reality hit harder. In moments of trouble, my son's first instinct wasn't to call his father. The nurse came out and said I could go in. Ethan looked up when I walked in, his leg wrapped in a temporary brace. His expression was neutral, careful. "Hey, Dad," he said. "Hey, champ, how's the leg?" "It's fine, just sore." I sat in the chair next to his bed, unsure what to say. Daniel stepped in a moment later, and Ethan's face lit up in a way it hadn't for me. Daniel smiled. "Told you you'd be fine. You'll be back on the field in no time." Ethan nodded. "Thanks, Coach." I watched the exchange, the ease between them. Daniels wasn't trying to replace me. He was just there, consistently, in all the moments I hadn't been. And in that sterile hospital room, with the sound of monitors beeping softly, I realized something I couldn't ignore anymore. If I didn't fight for my place in my son's life, I'd lose it completely. Claire arrived at the hospital not long after I did. She came in quickly, her expression sharp but composed. She went straight to Ethan's side, brushing his hair back and checking his bandaged leg. "Everything's fine," Daniels reassured her, giving a brief summary of what the doctors had said. Claire nodded, then looked at me. "Can we talk outside?" Her tone wasn't angry. It was worse. It was controlled. I followed her into the hallway. "You know what I'm going to say," she started. I swallowed. "That I should have been here sooner?" She shook her head. "That you haven't been here at all. Not when it matters." I opened my mouth to respond, but she held up a hand. "Mark, I'm not saying this to punish you, but you need to understand something. Whether you like it or not, Coach Daniels has stepped into a space you left empty. Ethan trusts him. He goes to him. That's not because Daniels tried to replace you. It's because you left room for someone else to be there." Her words landed heavy. "I know," I admitted quietly. "I've seen it." She studied me for a long moment. "Then do something about it. If you still want to be part of his life, show him. Not by showing up once in a crisis, consistently, and without expecting credit for it." Her voice softened slightly. "He's a good kid. He hasn't closed the door on you yet, but it won't stay open forever." Before I could answer, Daniels stepped into the hall. "Everything okay?" he asked, glancing between us. Claire gave him a nod. "I think we're done here." She went back into Ethan's room, leaving me alone with Daniels. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I said, "I appreciate what you've done for him. I do. But I need to understand something. Why? Why step in like this?" Daniels leaned against the wall, his expression thoughtful. "You think I haven't been where you are?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" He let out a quiet sigh. 10 years ago, I was you. I had a good job, long hours, a family waiting at home. I kept telling myself I was building a future for them. Then one day, I came home and my wife was gone. Took my son with her. Said she was tired of being married to a ghost. I was silent, unsure what to say. "I didn't fight for them soon enough," he continued. "By the time I realized what I'd lost, it was too late. My son's grown now. We talk sometimes, but it's not the same. Coaching. It's my way of trying to do better, even if it's for someone else's kid." It was the first time I'd seen something vulnerable behind the confident voice that commanded the field. "I'm not here to replace you, Mark," he said. "I'm here because Ethan needs someone who shows up. If that can be you again, I'll step back. But you have to earn it." His words were simple, but they hit me harder than I expected. Inside the room, I could hear Claire's voice, soft and warm as she spoke to Ethan. I thought about all the moments I had traded for meetings and deadlines, and for the first time, I saw Daniels not as a rival, but as a mirror, a version of myself I didn't want to become in 10 years. "You're right," I said finally. "I've been waiting for the right time to fix things, but the right time isn't coming. It's now or never." Daniels gave a small nod. "Then start now. Not next week, not at the next game. Now." When we stepped back into the room, Ethan looked at me briefly, then returned his attention to Daniels. It stung, but this time I didn't feel defensive. I felt determined, because I wasn't going to lose my son the way Daniels had lost his. That night after leaving the hospital, I didn't go home right away. I drove around the city aimlessly, the kind of wandering you do when you're trying to outrun your own thoughts. But no matter where I turned, I kept seeing the same thing in my head. Daniel's leaning against the wall, telling me I was running out of time. I saw myself in him, not just in the way we both wore tired eyes, but in the weight behind his words. He had already lived through the ending I was barreling toward. He wasn't warning me out of rivalry. He was warning me out of recognition. By the time I got back to my apartment, the silence felt heavier than usual. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the half-finished glass of water in front of me. Around the room, reminders of my so-called success were everywhere. Plaques, awards, framed articles. They felt meaningless now, almost mocking. I thought about Ethan lying in that hospital bed, about how his face lit up when Daniels walked in, how his tone shifted when talking to me. It wasn't that he didn't love me anymore. It was that I hadn't given him reasons to trust me. The next morning, Daniels called. I was surprised to see his name on my phone. "I wanted to check on Ethan," he said. "He's fine," I replied. "Sore, but the doctor says he'll be back in practice soon." There was a pause, then his voice softened. "Mark, I'm not the enemy here. I know it feels like you're fighting me for a place in his life, but you're not. You're fighting yourself, the version of you that keeps finding excuses not to be there." I didn't say anything right away. "You still have a chance," he continued. "I can tell he hasn't shut you out completely. But chances like that don't last forever. If you've got one more shot, fight for it. Not against me, not against Claire, but against the part of you that keeps running back to work instead of running toward him." His words landed like a challenge and a lifeline. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. Daniels was right. This wasn't about competing for a role. This was about showing up again and again until Ethan believed I was staying for good. That afternoon, I stopped by the hospital again. Ethan was sitting up, scrolling through his phone. He looked surprised to see me. "You're here again," he said cautiously. "Yeah," I said, pulling up a chair. "Thought I'd check in before practice starts again. You bored yet?" He gave a small shrug. "A little." We sat there in an awkward quiet for a moment. I realized then how many times I had filled silences like this with small talk about school, sports, or whatever else felt safe. But this time, I decided not to hide behind comfort. "I wasn't there for a lot of things," I said finally. I told myself I'd make it up later, but later kept getting further away. That's on me. I can't change the past, but I want to change what comes next. Ethan didn't look at me right away, but he didn't turn away either. "I'm not asking you to believe me right now," I continued. "I just want you to see it." He shifted in bed, his expression unreadable. "We'll see," he said quietly. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't rejection either. As I left the hospital that evening, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: clarity. Daniels's words echoed in my head. "If you've got one more shot, fight for it." And for the first time, I knew exactly who I needed to fight. 2 days after Ethan was discharged from the hospital, I walked into my office and handed my assistant a letter. She looked down at the envelope, then back up at me. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "Positive," I said. It wasn't a resignation letter, not yet. But it was close. I had drafted a formal request to step back from my position as managing partner, scaling down my workload to a fraction of what it had been. My partners would think I was insane. Maybe I was. But Daniels was right. This wasn't about them. It was about me and Ethan. At the board meeting later that day, I slid the letter across the table. "I can't lead this firm the way I have been," I said. "My priorities have changed." The room went quiet. A few raised eyebrows, a few frowns. One partner spoke up. "Mark, this will cost you a fortune. Are you sure you want to do this now, when the firm's at its peak?" I thought of Ethan in that hospital bed, looking at me like he wasn't sure if I'd still be there tomorrow. "Yes," I said simply. "I'm sure." By the end of the week, my schedule had changed drastically. I no longer had back-to-back meetings from dawn to dusk. There were open spaces in my calendar, spaces I intended to fill with something better. The following Saturday was Ethan's first practice back since his injury. I showed up early, standing off to the side of the field. When the team arrived, he spotted me almost immediately. His brow furrowed. "Dad? What are you doing here?" "Came to watch practice," I said, trying to sound casual. He hesitated. "You don't have to. I want to." The practice went on, and I stayed through the entire thing. Daniels gave me a small nod from the sidelines, but didn't say much. Ethan didn't look my way often, but I noticed he didn't tell me to leave either. The next week, I showed up again, and the week after that. By the fourth practice, I decided to try something more. After the session, I approached Ethan as the team was packing up. "Hey, want to grab dinner? My treat," I offered. He glanced at a few of his teammates standing nearby. "No thanks, I'm busy." It wasn't just a refusal, it was a refusal in front of everyone. My chest tightened, but I forced a small smile. "Okay, maybe another time." As he walked off with his friends, I caught snippets of their conversation. They weren't mocking me, just talking about the game. But the message was clear. I wasn't part of his world here. Not yet. That night, I sat in my car longer than usual before driving home. Part of me wanted to retreat, to take the easy route and let him keep his distance. But then I remembered Daniels's words. Fight for it. Fighting meant pushing past discomfort, even when it hurt. So I kept showing up. Over the next few weeks, I started finding small ways to be present without being intrusive. I helped carry equipment when practice ended. I stayed on the sidelines during games, cheering with the other parents. I didn't push for conversations. I let him see that I was there, consistently. And slowly, the team began to notice. Parents would nod at me, offer small talk. Daniels gave me updates about Ethan's progress, but always with a subtle undertone. Don't give up. Then came the first game after Ethan's return from injury. The stands were crowded, energy high. I took a seat near the front. Midway through the game, Ethan made a great pass that led to a goal. The crowd cheered. I stood to clap, but Ethan didn't look toward me. His eyes went to Daniels, just as they always had. It stung, but I stayed in my seat. I reminded myself this wasn't about instant results. After the game, as the team huddled, I approached again. Great game, Ethan. Want to celebrate? Pizza's on me. He shook his head. I'm going out with the team. The rejection was public again. This time I felt every eye on me, but I nodded. Okay, have fun. As he walked away, Daniels came over. Don't take it personally. He's not testing whether you'll show up. He's testing whether you'll stay after he pushes you away. I watched Ethan laughing with his teammates, limping slightly but smiling. For the first time, I realized that being a father now wasn't about grand gestures that fixed everything overnight. It was about showing up again tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, until he believed I wasn't leaving. The following weeks were a test of patience I hadn't experienced in my entire career. At work, progress could be measured. Contracts signed, deals closed, numbers on a balance sheet. But here, with Ethan, the results were invisible. I kept showing up. Practices, games, team events. Claire noticed. One evening, after practice, she approached me while Ethan was packing up. "You've been around a lot lately," she said. "I told you I would be," I replied. Her expression was guarded. "Mark, I don't mean to sound ungrateful, but you've made promises before. Big ones. And when you broke them, Ethan was the one who had to deal with it. I'm not trying to keep you out of his life. I'm trying to keep him from being hurt again." "I understand," I said, and for once, I meant it without defensiveness. Claire studied me for a moment, as if searching for cracks in my resolve. "If you're serious about this, it can't just be for a season. It can't be something you do until work gets busy again." "It's not," I told her. "Work's not going back to what it was. I made sure of that." She didn't respond, but the look in her eyes shifted slightly, less like disbelief, more like cautious curiosity. Ethan, on the other hand, was harder to read. He wasn't cold toward me anymore, but he wasn't warm either. It was as if he'd built a wall that I could see over but not through. Then, one Thursday evening, it happened. I had just gotten home from a late meeting when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan. "Hey, Dad. You good with computers, right?" I stared at the message, my heart skipping. "Yeah," I replied. "What's up?" "I have this school project, science fair. I'm trying to make a model with some coding, but I'm stuck." I read it twice, just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. It wasn't about soccer. It wasn't about logistics. It was him reaching out to me for help. "Send me what you have," I wrote back. "I'll take a look." He hesitated. "It's kind of late. Maybe you could come over tomorrow?" I typed quickly before he could change his mind. "Absolutely. I'll be there after school." The next afternoon, I showed up at Claire's house with my laptop. Ethan met me at the door, a little awkward but clearly invested in the project. "It's a model of planetary motion," he explained, leading me to the dining table where his laptop and a half-built display were set up. "I got most of the math right, but I can't get the simulation to run properly." We spent the next 2 hours troubleshooting code, tweaking formulas, and adjusting variables. At first, our conversation was all about the project, but gradually, it shifted. He told me about his science teacher, about a funny moment in class, about how his friend's project involved launching a homemade rocket. It wasn't deep, life-changing conversation, but it was more than I'd had from him in years. When we finally got the simulation running smoothly, Ethan grinned. "That's awesome. Thanks, Dad." The words were simple, but they landed like a victory. Claire watched from the kitchen. When I was packing up to leave, she walked me to the door. "That meant more to him than you think," she said quietly. "I hope so," I replied. Her gaze was steady. "Mark, if you're going to keep doing this, keep showing up. You might actually get through to him. But if you leave again—" "I'm not leaving," I said. For the first time, she didn't argue. She just nodded. Driving home that night, I realized something important. The project wasn't really about science or coding. It was about trust. Ethan hadn't asked me to fix his life. He'd asked me to fix a piece of code. But underneath, it was his way of testing if I'd be there when he needed me, even for something small. And this time I was. The weeks that followed felt different. Not because everything had changed, but because small changes were finally sticking. Ethan didn't suddenly start texting me every day or asking me to hang out, but he no longer seemed surprised when I showed up. He'd acknowledge me with a nod, a quick, "Hey, Dad," before heading to practice or joining his friends. It wasn't much, but it was a shift. I started paying attention to the little things, the kind of moments I used to miss: a midweek scrimmage, a fundraiser for the team, an informal meetup where the kids gathered to watch a professional match together. I was there for all of it. Sometimes I stayed in the background, clapping when everyone else clapped, laughing when a parent told a joke. Other times, I helped Daniels set up cones before practice or carried equipment after the game. Daniels noticed, of course. One afternoon, as we were packing up after a rainy practice, he looked at me and said, "You've been consistent." "I said I'd be here," I replied. He nodded. Consistency is half the battle. Ethan's reaction to me was still careful, but every so often, there were glimpses of something warmer. After one practice, he tossed me his water bottle and said, "Can you hold this?" It was small, but it was trust in motion. Then came the regional final. It was one of the biggest games of the season. The stands packed tighter than I'd ever seen. Parents waved banners, kids painted their faces. The energy was electric. I took my usual spot on the sidelines, close enough to see the field, but far enough not to crowd the team. Daniels was pacing, focused on the game plan. Just before kickoff, he turned to me. "Walk with me for a second." We stepped away from the bench. "What's up?" I asked. He handed me the clipboard. "You're sitting here today." I blinked. "What?" "You're taking my seat on the bench," he said. "Right next to Ethan. I'll coach from the sideline." "That's not Daniels, this is your team," I protested. He shook his head. "Mark, you've been working for this, earning back your place. This is a big game. He needs to see you here. Not just in the stands. He needs to feel like you're part of the team that supports him." I hesitated, looking over at Ethan. He was stretching with the team, focused on the game ahead. "You sure about this?" I asked quietly. Daniels gave a half smile. "If I weren't, I wouldn't have offered." "Sit down, Mark. Today isn't about me." I took the seat. It felt strange at first, being that close, hearing the plays called, watching the boys shout encouragement to each other. When Ethan glanced over and saw me there was a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Not discomfort, not annoyance, just surprise. Then he nodded once and turned back to the field. The game was tense from the start. Both teams were strong, trading goals back and forth. Every time Ethan made a good play, I wanted to leap to my feet, but I kept my focus steady, just like the other coaches. Midway through the second half, the opposing team scored, putting us behind by 1. Daniels called a timeout. The players gathered, breathing hard. I stayed quiet at first, letting Daniels speak. But then, as the boys prepared to run back onto the field, I said, "Ethan." He turned to me, eyebrows raised. "You've got this," I told him. "Play your game. Don't chase theirs." It wasn't a long speech, but something in his expression shifted. He nodded again, a little more firmly this time. The game resumed, and in the final minutes, Ethan made a clean pass that set up the winning goal. The crowd erupted. When the whistle blew, the team poured onto the field, cheering. Daniels clapped me on the shoulder. "Told you he needed to see you here." Ethan ran over to the bench, breathless, grinning. For a second, I thought he might ignore me in the excitement. But then he stopped in front of me. "Thanks, Dad," he said simply, before running back to celebrate with his teammates. It was 2 words, nothing more. but they were heavier than any award I'd ever received. After the game, as the crowd began to disperse, Daniels leaned in. That's what rebuilding looks like. Not big speeches, not grand gestures, just showing up again and again until moments like this happen. Driving home that evening, I realized he was right. The bench, the clipboard, the words at halftime, they weren't the point. The point was that Ethan saw me there, not just once, but every time. And slowly, we were building something again. The championship game came on a bright Saturday afternoon, the kind of day when the air feels charged before the first whistle. I arrived early, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to be there. The bleachers were already filling with parents, students, and fans. I scanned the rows, and my eyes landed on an empty spot. It was the same section I'd seen in that picture Claire sent me months ago. The one where Ethan sat alone, knees pulled close, while the rest of the team laughed with their families. I walked up the steps and took that exact seat. Minutes later, Ethan came out from the locker room with the team. His eyes swept over the stands and stopped when he saw me. There was no flicker of surprise this time. Instead, he gave a small nod and a half smile before turning back to warm up. The game started, and I cheered like everyone else. I didn't think about work, deadlines, or the things that used to fill my head. I was just here. At halftime, Ethan came to the bench for water. He glanced up at the stands, then jogged over. "Mind if I sit for a second?" he asked. I shifted to make room, surprised. Of course. He sat down next to me, both of us looking out at the field. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "This is the seat from that photo, isn't it?" I nodded. "Yeah, I thought it was time we made a new memory here." Ethan's gaze stayed on the field, but I caught the faintest smile. "Better one this time," he said quietly. The second half was intense. The game went into overtime, the crowd on edge. In the final minutes, Ethan made a critical play, passing instead of taking the shot himself, setting up the winning goal. The team swarmed the field, celebrating. When the noise died down, Ethan jogged over to the bleachers. He wasn't grinning like before. He looked calm, steady. "Glad you were here," he said simply. "I wouldn't be anywhere else," I replied. As the crowd thinned, I stayed in the stands, watching him laugh with his teammates. That's when I noticed Claire walking up the steps toward me. She stopped a few feet away. "This is a first," she said. "What is?" I asked. "You, in the same seat from that photo, except now you're not watching from a distance. You're part of his life again." I exhaled, unsure what to say. "I've still got work to do." Claire nodded. "You always will. But he sees it, Mark. I see it too." She paused, her voice softer. "I'm not here to talk about us. That's done. I just wanted to say thank you for actually changing, for not making this another promise you couldn't keep." Her words landed heavier than I expected. Not because I hoped for anything more from her, but because I realized this was the first time in years she looked at me without disappointment. We stood there for a moment, watching Ethan on the field. "I'm not doing this for thanks," I said finally. "I'm doing it because I should have been doing it all along." Claire gave a small smile. "Maybe, but it matters that you're doing it now." She turned to leave, pausing halfway down the steps. "See you at the next game?" "You will," I said, and for the first time, I knew it was the truth. Ethan glanced back at me one last time before heading into the locker room, and in his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. trust beginning to rebuild. One game, one seat, one day at a time. There's a saying in business: success leaves clues. In family, failure leaves them too. And I've been walking through mine for years. I used to think my story was about winning at work and losing at home. A cautionary tale for men who believed they could put life on pause while they built their careers. But it's more than that. It's about time. How much we waste. How little we get back. Standing in that same stadium weeks after the championship, I watched Ethan warming up for another game. The stands weren't as packed. The noise was quieter, but the feeling was the same. I turned to one of the other parents and said, "You know, I almost lost all of this. Not because of some big mistake, but because of 1,000 small ones. I kept thinking there would always be another game, another chance, another season, until there wasn't." Later that week, I was invited to speak at a business networking event. Instead of the usual talk about leadership or growth strategies, I told them this story. About the photo of Ethan sitting alone in the bleachers. About deleting it because I couldn't face what it meant. Don't let that photo be the last thing you get from your family, I told them. The deals will wait. The money will come again. But your kid's childhood doesn't. Their trust doesn't. And once that's gone, no amount of success can buy it back. I didn't dress it up. I didn't make myself the hero. I told the truth. That night, after the event, I drove straight to Ethan's game. I got there early this time. The field was still quiet, the sun just beginning to set. Ethan arrived with the team, surprised to see me already in the stands. "You're early," he said. I smiled. "Trying to change my habits." He shook his head, a half smile tugging at his mouth. Better than showing up at halftime. We sat there for a moment before he went to warm up. I thought back to the man I'd been a year ago, the man who thought presence could be scheduled, that love could be measured in occasional appearances. The truth was, the big changes didn't come from the grand gestures. They came from the small, consistent choices. Showing up early, staying through the end, being there when no one was keeping score. As the game ended, a win, though not the championship, I waited near the sidelines. Ethan walked over, sweaty and tired, but smiling. "Good game," I said. "Thanks," he replied, then hesitated. "Hey, Dad?" "Yeah?" "Next time, try to get here even earlier, okay? So I don't have to look around to see if you're here." It was such a simple request, but to me it was everything, because after all these years, he wasn't wondering whether I'd show up. He was asking me to be there sooner,